Cranial movements. Knowing if it's cerebral palsy, possibly cancer, tumor. It's actually easy for me. Maybe not so easy for you, more so because you don't have the experience. But you can get the experience. When you have a problem or a concern, especially when there's been trauma, it's trauma to the cranial region, you need a solution. You need a plan, you need a solution. Now, the solutions are here. Cranial, so far for my cranial movement programs, I have the head and sutures, but I also have the nasal, ear, and sinuses. I'm trying to work on the palate course, but I need to get the reflex course done, and that's chomping at the bit too. So I'm going to be cranking out a lot this weekend. But the good thing is I have a schedule now for the whole year. The bad thing is I have a schedule for the whole year. So, but with cranial, a lot of people look at cranial and they think cranial sacral. I'm a CS2 level. I don't practice it, but I've done it because I wanted that experience, but it still didn't give me this experience as I was looking for. I'm very fortunate that in a sense, I don't have two hands. I have probably 12 hands. So I have the two hands. This is where how many squares do you see in a square? Every 10 finger of the palms, all this give me neurofeedback, just as it does your child when they're grabbing a rattle. It gives them neurofeedback. My neurofeedback is that I can not only see movement, but I can feel movement. Not only can I see when child has special needs, but I know the relationship that it has. I can feel gravity. I can feel atmospheric pressure. Most people just don't play with those things, so they're not aware of it, but these are just things that I work with on a daily basis. I enjoy it. I think it's fascinating to teach it. Like today I was working with a mom and I was teaching her hanging technique that you learn in segment 1 because her child, and this is what you have to do when you have either a high tone or a low tone child, you have to offer them where they would be in space normally. What does that mean? So go back to our fun plant. This plant, that's all it does, it's a plant, knows where it needs to be in space all the time. Right? No matter what I do, this space will counter, or this plant will counter my movements. That's just what it does. It's a living biological organism. It naturally has rotation. Gosh, please stop watching the geometrics where they shoot from here and they show the star. No, guys, it's rotational movements in opposition to gravity. I don't know why people just don't see it. Look at any plant in slow motion. If they don't have rotation, they're going to die. Same thing with us, to put it point blank. And we don't want to pass away. I'm getting dirt all over my table. But no matter what I do, this plant will counter my movements. Fine. Okay, now I really have a mess. Now, when I'm working with a ball, two balls, I have now inanimate objects. So they can give the demonstration, but no matter what, these objects, no matter how I move them, they want to fall. And this is where they really have it incorrect in physics because they say gravity is a pulling force. Nowhere, shape, and form did this plant have a pulling force. It had a counter-oppositional force with rotational movements. It's just that simple. Now, if I put this ball in the plant, right, at some point, right, gravity there takes the ball and that goes down. Now, again, this is an inanimate object and we're dealing with a living biological creature. Now, you can't see this plant rotating and you can't see myself rotating because you're rotating and we cancel each other out. We're spinning off the earth, we're doing this. Now, one of the reasons you can tell if someone's got special needs or not is because that's why they are off. Their counter rotation off the earth right away is just off. So you can say that with people that abuse alcohol, drugs, and so forth. Their systems are impaired to this, and they're just, oh, I'm going to fall down. You don't fall down. I don't fall down. Now, if I do fall down, you know what I mean? Same speed as the ball. I totally concur with that, but we don't fall down in general. Now, when I'm working with cranial movements, and now this is an adult skull and plastic, so again, when I demonstrate off of this, I'm still dealing with an inanimate object, trying to teach human biology, right? And so this is why, too, I prefer to do demos on live people. But no matter what I'm doing, the way I have to touch and rotate is that the head responds just like that plant. It goes in certain areas, right? And goes and counter opposes. I usually get low, I get down here, I get, I'll never work on a head like this. And again, this is the stuff that frustrates me when I do take other people's training. They don't understand touch, they don't understand the forces of movement, they don't understand how biology responds. They feel that your application that is done to this person, that part, sort of like a stamp, is going to be the same for this person. And this is why I always want to watch videos. I need to see how that person's organizing movement within what I just explained to you, right? Now let's say I have CP. CP is a brain bleed to the head somehow for trauma. Now, CP can also include macrocephaly, microcephaly. I can go on that, but I'm just talking about introducing your hands to the touch of when there's been trauma. Now, when you've had a brain bleed in the cranium, you've now caused death within the cerebellum. The spinal fluid is the only place where you can have death and it can maintain itself in the human body. My appendix dies, it's got to come out. Right? But death in the body, like I said, stroke in utero, all that cranium activity can stay there. Again, this is stuff that's not taught in other classes. It's taught here. And it's taught here live, free. Christina's going to be the wisest person here because she watches all my lives. God bless you. So now there's different types of trauma. Now let's just say that this ball here is a tumor. Now, a tumor is a little bit differently. A tumor still is a living organism, and Graham says law all the time too. A tumor is a living organism, but it's still a mass, right? So when you have to look at, I gotta put my glasses on 1 second, Christina. When you're looking at a mass, and now cancers are worse. Cancers are worse, why? Because it doesn't rotate. Cancer is very antagonistic. It doesn't play well with others. And that's why people say, oh, I don't know what happened. They died. They had very little cancer in them. You know what I mean? It's a cancer. No, it's the person didn't have good rotational responses, right? And had the cancer and bam. I've got a woman, I'm telling you, I worked on her forever. She can't have any more surgeries, swear to God. She doesn't have any gut left. She's got a colostomy and stuff. You would never know she was stage 4. And it's for as long, and what she's endured. She walks into my office like the tallest drink of water you've ever seen. And she'll look at me too. She'll go, Michelle, you need to get out. You need to get out more, Michelle. You gotta get on that bicycle. You haven't been riding that bicycle. She's all about the rotation. She swims, she rides her bike. She's like, I go to chemo, everyone's just sitting there. And I tell everybody, you need to get up. I don't care how much it hurts, you need to get up. And but she practices what I preach, what she preached. If you don't move it, you lose it. So when you're working with cranial movements, now again, most people are very visual, so they're going to be looking at the eyes, the eyebrows, that kind of thing. Close your eyes, when you're working with the cranium courses, or even the head and vision or the swallow courses or any of the courses. I used to work on my kids, it was pitch black because I'd put my hand on, I'm like, okay, where's my hand? I really had to teach myself, like I almost had to undo my learning to relearn it. And so when you're going here and so forth, and you're doing all of this, now again, I can teach you how to do cranial midlines, no problem, and so forth. But when you're dealing with someone that has, again, trauma, that will want to sink. So when your hands start getting really sensitive, just naturally it will want to settle or sink there, because that's where, let's say, the stroke happened, right? Or PVL3, we'll say. But when you have a tumor, now the tumor doesn't sink as much because it's encapsulated within the cranium and it wants to move around it, right? And so you will get more of I call it like almost like a slosh, like my hands feel like a tip back forth. Now cancer at some areas will just say, I'm not moving. And then I go other places and it's like, all right, I can feel it. But again, it just doesn't want to give me the right opportunity for movement. The tonus is really off with cancer. When I touch, that Pillsbury, that seeing it bread's ready kind of touch, even around the cranium, I'm not getting it. Cancer makes the skin very shallow. to my touch, for lack of a better visualization. I might not know what type of cancer you have, but I've sent enough people, like doctors, that way. You just need to get off the table and go. I've been fortunate. There was such a dear man, and oh my God, he loved his wife. She was 84. He had a carcinic melatonin and malignancy in his lungs, and so the tumor came wrapped around his rib cage and came out. He died 4 days after I worked on him. But his friend just wanted him to have peaceful breathing as much as possible. But all he could think of, he was like, I've been married. It's like 60 some years. I mean, he's like, my wife needs to be here. She would just love this. And I'm like, the peace he had, you know what I mean? But again, just trying to get him to cross a midline with that kind of cancer was just, like, I wanted to just go and push. So when your touch does get more sensitive, you can get it. Like, I'm really good at infections because that's what Graham had. I was working with an adult woman with EDS and so forth, and she's just like, I just need to work. And so she's just concentrating on her genetics. And I'm just like, what happened with this PICC line? She goes, how do you know I had a PICC line? I'm like, because it was all because it went through the main carotid artery, and it went in through the pelvis. I don't know why I can't talk right now. So, and then when I got to the foot, I'm like, oh, here's your problem. When was that infection? And she goes, how do you know I had infection? So now on her behalf, I think the husband just thought I was a witch. I'm a spoon bender. And he's like, and I said, I can tell if you have cancer or not. I can tell, but now I don't know what it is. I said, but an affected area, it all depends. It can get really swollen in the area. So that, especially around the foot, and when that starts getting into a sepsis line and so forth, which I've saved Diane's life over that. One of her many times I've had to save her life, but that has a whole nother, because the whole system wants to bulge out, just like too, if you have diverticulitis and so forth, the way it goes through the abdomen, that infection just goes whoosh with a lymphatic response. There's lots of different things that can go on. So when you're working with craniums and so forth, now what do you do about it? This is again where you take the course, but you can start working with the head and acknowledge the mass that's going on, whether it's death, whether it's a tumor, whether it's cancer, and then now show the system what it would feel like to move cranial movements as if that mass was not occurring within the system. Another thing is, again, we start having shunts. We can have this conversation now. That's an inanimate object, or just where you look at where I teach glasses on, glasses off. In more of the trainings, it really makes a big difference for you to understand how mass is. I really need someone with an Apple Watch because, or honestly, probably shouldn't say it liability-wise, but please don't wear them. Any kind of the gyroscopes on your wrist, not a good idea for your thing. So anyway, let me just see what you have to say. Movement is so important, and watching people in the grocery store. My worst place is the airlines. You know what I mean? Or when people just get to the hotels, they've got the kitchen sink. They don't want to pay the $25 to check their luggage, but meanwhile they're schlepping and flying God knows how many hours. By the time they get to where they're going, they look like that scientist from Beavis and Butthead. Not Beavis and Butthead. I can't think of things today. It was a cute show where they had the scientists they were going after. Phineas and Ferb. I know that. So anyway, you know what I mean? Like, check your luggage, take a chill, just feel the plant, versus the mass, and go from there. So anyway, just a thoughts about, cranial trauma, whether it's ongoing or it's happened. Is very interesting and can be worked with. And on top of that too, that's not including, let's say if you were in a car accident and now you have the scar tissue, or you've had the hit, when the oxygenation is leaving the bone tissue and all of that sort of things, really will affect your touch and the cranial movements. And again, it's just that stuff you just have to go into the trainings, and that's what it's there for. Probably my cranial courses are some of my best stuff, and it's probably just the most underlooked, because people are here to help their child today. But again, optimal movement is optimal movement, and that's what we're after. But you can't be, look at the football players. How many concussions do you want? They can't play anymore. But I really believe that any professional athlete, if they came here, you get 2 years onto your life, your professional life. That's huge. That's huge. But again, they just don't. People really are unfortunate to people that are very fortunate, because they look like, oh, what, just brush it off, you'll be fine, kind of thing. But they do it to our kids. Our kids have such trauma, and it's like, oh, come back in 6 months, and I'm like, what? Who's helping me in the meanwhile? So hopefully that's what you get from being here, and I'll see you in a little bit. Hi, Irene.